Then I go to B.
He was with CSI, I was at the same after the hearing. Travis And so it's a regional government. So we are federally So I've got 72 cities, 146 townships, 33 school districts. My only MSA is Mankato. But at the state level, we receive the state statute, so we receive part of the tax loans, state dollars, and federal dollars. We're not the Met Council, we don't compare ourselves to the Met Council, we're not appointed by the governor. The governor is the teacher, though. For transportation, remind your boss that Mankato, cities already have rail, so passenger rail would be really cool. Rochester and Quincy doesn't have rail, we I mostly all of Winston, yep, so Winston. We have a majority of all the first congressional district, and I have a little bit more in the second congressional district, 1.5 of my county, and then Eugene Drake is one of my counties. So I used to be just first congressional district, 120 to be seventh, and then now I'm just I've got 3 now. So I need to go work on it.
Waiting for those dinners to start up. We're waiting on Greg. They're going to do them at Baker Bacon. And that'll be really nice. Really hope he's out of business. They were determined. The last year or two was really nice. It was also inconvenient getting around by Tyson. Pentagon City is one
Not by me.
That'd be great.
Wow, I didn't even have to bang any gavel or anything. Well, welcome to the Defense Forum Foundation's Congressional Defense and Foreign Policy Forum. I am delighted you all could join us. I apologize for we have never gotten so many RSVPs the day before a forum, and I've been doing these forums for decades. So we were a little concerned, and we hope we were able to accommodate everybody, because our main concern was that we would be able to accommodate everyone. So it looks like everything worked out. But I want to welcome you. I'm Suzanne Schulte, President of the Defense Forum Foundation. And for those attending this forum for the first time, we have been doing these programs since the 1980s to provide congressional staff the opportunity to hear from expert speakers on important national security, defense, and foreign policy issues. Back then, we were chiefly focused on the national security, but since all the bad actors in the world are not just a threat to America, but they're also a threat to their own people, horrible to their own people, without exception, we decided to expand our programs to not just focus on national security, but to also focus on the importance of expanding and promoting freedom, democracy, and human rights abroad, which is what brings us to this program today. Now, first, I want to just acknowledge a couple people in the audience. One of my heroes and someone who has spoken at these forums before, Dr. Yang Jiang Li. If you could stand up. He's a survivor of Tiananmen Square and a bold champion for human rights for the people of China, and one of my heroes. Thank you. He's also the president of Citizens Power Initiative. I think I've always told you, you do some of the neatest stuff. He comes up with these great ideas to advance China human rights, so he's been a big inspiration to me. I also want to acknowledge a North Korean defector who's here. We're not having him speak because we're all focused on the women, but I want to focus on the men too, because we know what the difference is now. But Mr. Hyung Sung Lee, if you could stand, he's an escapee from North Korea also. He's a fellow at the Global Peace Foundation, and his sister is at Columbia, and she's going to be joining us on Thursday at the panel on the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which is why we brought these witnesses here to testify up there. I also want to acknowledge, and just for the interest of time, just raise your hands, but I want to acknowledge this amazing group of people known as the North Korea Freedom Coalition. We have a lot of members here today. They are awesome. So just raise your hands. North Korea Freedom Coalition members, please raise your hands. These are the folks that protest at the Chinese embassy, that host events, that are pray and bake for the North Koreans, but they're an amazing group, and I love them very much, and they make me look like I do a good job. So I also want to thank Representative Young Kim and their staff, Kevin there and Shine, because they were the ones that got us this room. It's so great to be back on Capitol Hill again, to see your faces. It's good to be in person. For those that are coming to the forum for the first time, I hope that you'll be back. I want to just highlight one thing that's very important to us, and you're going to realize that when you hear these witnesses, and that is the information campaign into North Korea. We are very, very involved in that. We broadcast into North Korea every morning and every evening in a unique partnership between freedom-loving Americans and North Korean escapees, like the people you're about to hear from. But we have a special thing we do for members of Congress, and any of you, I have these flyers before you leave. I want you to take one of these. We broadcast messages from members of Congress every New Year during the periods of January, February, March to celebrate the New Year, and then we also do it in August and September for Korean Liberation Day. And all we do is we ask senators and congressmen, what would you like to tell the people of North Korea if you had the opportunity to do that? And we have Democrats and Republicans, a wonderful mix of folks from all over the United States of America that participate in this program. And if your congressman or senator isn't doing it, you definitely want to get involved in this, because it's really exciting. And it's mind-blowing for the North Koreans who hear the Free North Korea radio broadcast to hear from these Americans that they think are Yankee imperialist wolves who occupy South Korea, but they talk about how much they care about the people of North Korea, and they want them to enjoy the same freedom and human rights that South Koreans and Americans enjoy. So I just want to say that for the congressional staff that are here, if you want to grab one of these flowers before you leave, we'd love to have you join that program. Now, you are about to hear some of the most inspiring people that we have invited to visit us from South Korea. to present, as I mentioned, this panel that we're doing at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Our focus for this week, and we decided to bring them to Washington first before we go up to New York, our focus has been to try to save the over 600 plus North Korean children, women and men, that face certain torture and likely execution if they're forced back to North Korea from China when the border opens. These are people that escaped during the COVID pandemic. The only way they could have gotten out of North Korea is if they had the resources. And if they had the resources, that means they had to either be Korean Workers' Party members who had access to capital or family in South Korea that financed their escape. Now, what that means, if they're forced back, those are crimes punishable by death in North Korea. So we're raising attention. We're going to actually do some events up in New York focused on trying to save the refugees. These are families. And our translator, Esther Kim, her niece got arrested recently in Inner Mongolia. She was trying to escape. So this is about families. And the women you're going to hear from, one rescued her daughter, one rescued her two sons, and one was rescued by her mother. So this is about families, and we're going to be emphasizing that and trying to save these refugees because it's a critical, urgent time right now. And the second thing is human rights. We want to get the focus back on human rights. People are talking about Kim Jong-un's daughter's ICBM necklace that he gave her and going to the military parades and who's in favor in that regime, and they're not paying attention to the horrific crimes against humanity that are occurring every day in North Korea. We want to get the focus back on this brutal dictatorship and what it's doing to human beings, innocent human beings. In fact, a dear friend and close colleague of mine who I worked with for decades, the highest ranking defector, the creator of the Juche ideology, Hwang Jan-yap, he said, human rights is the Achilles heel of the regime. Human rights. When people understand that they have value simply by being born, that's their Achilles heel. That's what Hwang Jan-yap said. So we want to get the focus back on human rights. Just getting attention to what happens to the women of North Korea is another emphasis, and that's why we're going to be at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. We had a woman testify a couple of years ago at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and she said the value of a North Korean woman is the same value as a fly, and they take the brunt of the human rights violations in that country because they don't understand human rights. They have no concept of human rights, and they're treated horribly. So you're about to hear from these three brave women. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce them, all three of them at once, so that we can save as much time, so you'll have time to ask them some questions. And Esther Kim is going to provide translation. As I mentioned, her niece is in detention in China right now, facing repatriation, just because she was trying to get to South Korea. And Grayson Jang, where's Grayson? Oh, I think he's still working on translation. But Grayson Jang will be translating as well for them. So I want to acknowledge Esther Kim and Grayson Jang for helping us. So our first witness is going to be Lee Haeun. She's a survivor of 50 days of torture and detention for making phone calls to South Korea. She was helping people who escaped to connect to their North Korean, to get money and support to their North Korean families, okay? That's why she was tortured for 50 days, because that's a crime against the state in North Korea. After her husband was sent to a political prison camp for listening to South Korean radio broadcast, she and her daughter escaped in 2019, and I believe in one of the last groups to escape before the border shut down because of the COVID pandemic. Right after Ms. Lee, you're going to hear from another brave, amazing woman, Ji Hana. She's a survivor of North Korea's political prison camps and China's detention centers. She was an entrepreneur who lost everything during the infamous currency devaluation. She successfully defected in 2015, and then, get this, survivor of a detention center in China, survivor of a political prison camp in North Korea. This woman went back to China and risked her own life to rescue her two sons out of North Korea. And they are safely now in South Korea. Then you're going to hear from Han Sang-mi, who escaped from North Korea in 2011, when her mother, who had escaped before her, saved up enough money to pay brokers to get her out of North Korea. The trauma of what she experienced, having been feeling that her mother had abandoned her, led her to remain silent for a decade. But now she's speaking out and has published her memoir, co-written with Casey Lartigue, who's here from Freedom Speakers International, called Gaslight to Freedom, a North Korea daughter's search. I'm sorry, what did I say? Green light, sorry. Green light to freedom. A North Korean daughter's search for her mother and herself. I highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon and also on your website, right? Information on freedom. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Esther Kim, our translator, and Miss Lee come to the podium. Thank you all.
Hello, nice to meet you. I am Haeun from North Korea.
Okay. Actually, she had been defected from North Korea in 2019. As Dr. Shorty mentioned, she was one of the last group before the COVID.
지금 이 시각도 자유와 평등을 말살당한 채 살아가고 있는 북한의 불쌍한 여성들을 학대당하고 갇혀있는 저들의 송사를 위해 부족한 저희 입을 열 수 있는 기회를 마련해 주신 여러분들께 감사드립니다.
First of all, I would like to thank you everybody here for giving me this opportunity to speak for the poor women in North Korea who are suffering without freedom and equality, and for those people who are trapped and abused in detention centers as I speak.
바로 3년 전까지만 해도 북한에서 살아온 저의 처절한 삶을 이 짧은 시간 동안에 다 풀어낼 수 없는 스토리지만 비인간적인 삶 속에서 인권이란 말조차도 모르게 살아온 북한 여성들을 위해 세계의 관심이 주목되기를 원하고 바랍니다.
Though I cannot say fully how desperately and miserably I lived in North Korea just 3 years before, I want to express that the world put more interest in the North Korean women who are living inhumanly and not knowing even the meaning of the human right.
2015년 북한 중국 국경을 사이에 두고 밀수하던 제가 한국에 살고 있는 탈북민의 부탁을 받고 북한에 살고 있는 가족들에게 보내는 돈을 받아주려고 하던 중에 사용하던 핸드폰이 북한 보위부 감청기기에 걸려서 양강도 보위부 집결소에 잡혀가서 50일 동안 구류되어 있는 사건이 생기게 되었습니다.
In 2015, when I ran a trading business at the border between North Korea and China, I was caught and sent to the State Security Bureau detention center in Yanggangdo while I tried to receive money from a defector settled in South Korea and delivered the money to the family in North Korea. This happened because my cellular phone was detected by the State Bureau's wiretapping machine.
당시 저에게는 11살 난 딸애가 있었기에 저는 기어이 살아야만 했습니다.
At that time, I had 11-year-old daughter, and for her, I had to survive.
저를 잡아갔지만 심증은 있으나 물증이 없었기에 제가 어떻게 하나 버티고 견뎌야 했습니다.
I continuously kept denying their charge that I was talking to a defector in South Korea because there was a suspicion, but not the evidence.
그때 저와 그곳에 같이 갇혀있던 많은 여성들이 집결소에서 당한 비인간적 행위들, 심지어는 재판도 없이 사형당한 억울한 여성들에 대해서도 함께 호소하고자 합니다.
I also would like to inform the fact that despicable, inhumane treatment that was given to many women in the detention centers in North Korea, including the fact those women who have been unfairly executed without the trial.
갇혀있는 지하 감방에서 예심원실로 올라가는 그 전 구간을 저희는 허리를 펴지 못하고 머리를 아래 이렇게 받고 걸어가는 그 시간 동안에 많은 여성들의 어지럼증이 나고 앞이 보이지 않아 쓰러지는 현상들이 너무 많이 일어났지만 간수들은 빨리 걸으라 하고 계속 때립니다.
Okay. We detainees had to walk through a small corridor from our cell to an interrogating room on the second floor, putting our heads down as she just showed, and then while staring at your feet. So it's very, very uncomfortable posture. Walking with this position like that make people dizzy and unbalanced, so they may fall down. If they fall down, and of course that the guards, the very, very cruel guards kicked our back and legs and shouting very vulgar words. Just like, I don't want to mention about here, but it's a very bad, bad language. And also, did you do that? 했어요? 꿇어 앉았던 거?
아니,
Okay. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
또한 감방에서 저희는 10시간 동안을 앉아 있는데 두 무릎을 꿇고 그 위에 손을 넣고 명상하는 것처럼 앉아 있어야 되는데 움직이면 절대로 안 됩니다. 움직일 때는 처벌을 받아서 저희가 끌려 나갑니다.
And also, we had to kneel down while putting our hands on our lap for 10 hours without saying a word in a meditation posture, like a yoga style. You have to sit down like that for 10 hours. You could not move, slight, head movement, anything at all. If they moved, of course, that cruel punishment will start.
제가 조금 움직였다고 끌려나가서 철창에 끌려나가서 매를 맞는데 두 손을 철창 밖으로 내밀면 이렇게 내밀면 여기에 새 막대기로 두 열 손가락을 때립니다. 힘차게. 그러면 손이 벌어지고 알이 머리에 생기면서 아픕니다.
If we moved a little bit, we were pulled to the iron bar, and we were told to stretch our hands through the iron bar, and then the guards, beat our hands so hard and with iron stick. And instantly our hands become so bruised, and then we have some kind of a muscle cramp in our armpits.
그 아픔이란 말로 표현하기 힘들 정도이지만 입술을 깨물며 나라의 모습을 그려보며 눈물을 흘릴 뿐입니다.
Could you imagine how painful it was? Though I cannot express the pain verbally, I had to bear the pain and shed tears just quietly while biting my lips. And I got comforted, remembering my daughter's sweet appearance.
그러면 소리도 안 지르는 독한 년이라고 다시 머리카락을 이렇게 움켜잡아서 철창에다 칩니다.
If I don't cry out loudly, the guards banged my head to the iron bar so hard, saying I am such a vicious woman.
순간 눈에 불이 번쩍 일고 정신을 잃습니다.
Then suddenly I saw a star and I became unconscious.
그러나 그냥 눈물만 흘립니다. 그리고 그 비좁은 감방 안에 많은 범죄자들을 가다 놓고 보니 여성들이 빼곡히 있다나니까 이렇게 몸에서 땀내, 몸내, 머리에 이 가득합니다.
Even so, I had to just cry softly. And you can imagine, there was a stench throughout the small cell where so many women who had not bathed for so many days were crammed together like a sardine in a box. And we could not wash because there was no running water in the cell. And because of this condition, and the cellmates, head and all over their bodies were with so many lies.
같이 갇혀있는 감방 동기 중에 한 명이라도 움직인다면 다 같이 우리가 처벌을 받는데 무릎을 꿇고 두 손을 들고 처벌을 받습니다.
This is very military style. If one woman moved a little, everybody in the cell got punished. We had to kneel down by our hips. It's very funny position. It's not just kneel down. You have to kneel down, but your hip should be up like that, and then stretch your hands very high. That position. Okay.
여러분 한번 그 자세로 몇 분 앉아 있을까 모두 생각해 봐 주세요.
Please think how long you can endure in such a position.
그러나 제가 당한 고통은 함께 같이 있던 여성들에 비하면 또한 너무 약소합니다.
However, my suffering was far less than other women in the cell.
한 감방에 갇혀 있던 지연 엄마라는 여성은 당시 35세 정도의 젊은 나이에 친구들과 함께 한국으로 가려고 시도하던 중 보위부망에 잡혀서 4명이 보위부 집결소에 들어가게 되었습니다.
However, my suffering was far less than other women in the cell. My cellmate, 35-year-old, so-called Ji-yeon's mom, was captured while trying to escape to South Korea with 4 other young women and was detained with me.
같은 친구 박영희 엄마 함께 잡혔는데 한국 시도로 잡혀 그녀들은 정말 심하게 맞았습니다.
They were beaten so brutally with a hard bat club made of the birch tree. Yes.
벚나무로 만든 방치에 맞아서 감방에 들어오면 얼굴은 피멍이 들고 다리는 제대로 움직이지 못했지만 그녀들은 자기가 3, 4년 노동교화형만 하면 풀려나가는 줄 알고 있었습니다.
So their entire bodies were bruised and they could not walk properly due to the pain. But they thought they would be freed for spending several years at the correctional labor camp.
그러나 2015년 9월 그 4명의 여성들이 다른 사건으로 잡힌 여성들과 함께 총 6명이 보위부에서 일명 연풍동 사건으로 총살당했습니다.
But in the early September 2015, they were secretly shot to death with other 6 women who were caught for some other crimes. So they were shot to death just because they want to escape to a free world.
그리고
Okay. And then, yes, go ahead. Yes.
그리고 지조하던 조사원들은 승진되었습니다.
Okay. Ironically, interrogators and then investigators were promoted to a higher position because of this incident called Yeonpungdong case. Yeonpungdong is the place they used to live in Haeun, in Yanggangdo, in North Korea.
It is a story. I don't want to remember again. 마음이 너무 아픕니다.
Yeah, she once said this one herself in English. It is a story I do not want to remember again. It is so painful and it's so sickening. And me, as an interpreter, and me, my own niece is detained in detention center in Inner Mongolia as I speak. It's very personal to me. This one she did not tell me. I just told you. Okay.
그렇게 제가 보위부 집결소에 50여일 갇혀 있을 때 11살 난 딸의 학교로 찾아간 보위원들이 천진난만한 딸에게 너희 엄마가 쓰던 중국 핸드폰을 집에서 찾아주면 엄마가 인차 풀려난다고 희유하면서 엄청난 공포를 주었다는 것을 출소한 이후에야 알게 되었습니다.
While I was being detained in the detention center for 50 days during going through all those torture, the State Public Security Bureau officers even went to the school where her daughter attended and coaxed her. Okay, little girl, if you tell me where your mother hid that phone that she used, I will let your mother be free. Don't worry.
당시 집결소 잡혀갔다 온 후 저는 심한 두통과 불면증 또 여러 가지 정신건강을 인해서 너무 어렵게 알았고요. 딸애도 지금 현재도 공황장애로 앓고 있는데 대한민국에 와서 지금 많이 치료받고 있습니다.
And I learned of this story after I came out of the detention center, of course. I am still suffering from severe headache, insomnia, bad dreams, and depression, and then some panic disorder because of the 50 days brutal torture. My daughter is also suffering of the panic disorder. And she wakes up in the night and then scream. And then she and her, Mrs. Lee have been getting treatment for above conditions in South Korea now.
저는 우리가 사는 세상은 다 그런 줄 알았습니다.
I thought our living world was just like that.
그렇지만 대한민국에 와서야 천부가 인간에게 부여해준 자유와 인권을 우리 여성들도 누릴 수 있으며 지킬 권리가 있다는 것을 알게 되었습니다.
However, after I settled in South Korea, I came to realize that women can enjoy freedom and God-given human rights, and we do have the right to do so.
제가 이 귀한 자리에서 중언하게 된다고 하자 저와 함께 하나원을 수료한 가까운 언니가 지금 중국 감옥에 갇혀 있는 1년 9개월 된 딸 김현미에 대한 소리를 하면서 저한테 눈물로 호소했습니다.
When I mentioned this to my close friend who spent together at the Haeun, Haeun is a place where escapists get educated to get adjusted to the life in South Korea. That I would go to the U.S. to give my testimony to influential people like you. And she told me the story of Kim Hyun-mi's daughter, who is in danger of being repatriated to North Korea and right now being detained for 1 year and 9 months at the detention center in China. And she tearfully pleaded me to help her. 영어로.
Please help me. Please help me.
She won't say herself in English. Please help me. Help me.
지금의 이야기들이 지난 이야기들이 아닌 현재의 진행형이라는 것이 너무 슬픔입니다.
It is so sad that above happenings are still going on now in North Korea as we speak, not in the past.
21세기 아직도 인권이란 말조차 모르며 철창 없는 감옥 같은 그 땅에서 살아가고 있는 북한의 모든 주민들과 여성들을 위해 세계 여성 인권을 위한 관계자 모든 분들이 주목해 주시기를 진심으로 바랍니다.
I sincerely hope that all human rights activists like you here focus on promoting human rights for the poor women, actually poor men and women, especially women, in North Korea who are living in prison without iron bars and do not even know the meaning of human rights in the 21st century. Can you imagine?
현재 중국 감옥에 갇혀 있는 탈북민들을 불쌍히 생각해 주십시오. 우리 모두도 몸을 가졌은즉 학대받는 그들을 생각해 주십시오.
Please think of poor and helpless detainees in detention centers in China. I beg you to please help those detained women to be free and be reunited with their families and relatives in South Korea and in other parts of the free world.
저들이 북송된다면 그들에게 차려질 고통과 비참함을 방관하지 말고 평범한 엄마, 언니, 딸들이란 심정으로 저들을 살려주기 위해 같이 노력해 주십시오.
And please also think about that those people, women, were sent back to North Korea. They will face the death or very, very brutal torture. Think about that. So please, she is pleading, and I also pleading, help those detainees be free and then go to the free world like South Korea and United States.
하여 불쌍한 북한 여성들과 중국 감옥에 갇혀있는 탈북민들을 난민으로 인정되어 대한민국이나 제3국으로 갈 수 있게 저들이 생명을 건질 수 있게 우리 목소리에 귀를 기울여 주십시오. 도와주세요. Help me.
Okay, yeah, that she just repeated again. She just asking, pleading, please help those helpless and powerless and poor women who are in detention camps throughout China. And also remember that they are, I mean, for you, oh, they are very poor women, very poor people, but to me, it's my own niece. And those people can be somebody's mother, somebody's sister. You think about that, okay? Yeah. And please listen to our pleas to promote human rights for North Korean women and to free those detainees from China. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
저는 지구상의 유일한 분단 국가이며 인간 생지역인 북한 땅에서 살다가 2016년 대한민국에 입국한 지한나입니다.
Hi, this is Ji Haeun. I defected to South Korea in 2016 from North Korea. I lived in North Korea, which is the only divided country on earth and a living hell that has no parallel in the world.
저희 고향은 중국 국경을 접하고 있는 자그마한 산골 도시입니다.
My hometown is a small mountainous town in Yangon province to the border.
거기서 제가 우리 부모님들이 8남매 막내로 태어났으며 부모님들과 형제들은 모두 북한 정권에 충실하게 살아왔으며 저 역시 군 복무를 거쳐 결혼하고 두 아들의 엄마로 지극히 평범하게 살고 싶었습니다.
I was the youngest out of 8 siblings, and my parents or siblings were very loyal to the part and country. I was served in the military. After my service, I came to my hometown, met my husband, and gave birth to my 2 sons, living an ordinary life.
북한에서 1990년대, 2000년대 초엽에는 배고픔이 시달려 탈북하는 사람들이 많았지만 2010년도에 들어서부터는 자유를 찾아 탈북하는 사람들이 많이 늘어났습니다.
During the 90s and early 2000s, many North Koreans defected to China for food. However, since 2010, many North Koreans have been trying to defect for freedom.
1996년 고난이 행군 때 저희 남편은 강경화 진단을 받고 온전히 약도 써보지 못하고 사망하였고 저는 6살, 4살 두 아들을 데리고 정말 힘들게 그 고난이 행군을 겪게 되었습니다.
When the Adolescence March began in 1996, my husband died of hepatic crisis without being properly treated with medicine. So it was my 6-year-old son, 4-year-old son, and myself who had to endure the brutal Adolescence March together.
너무도 철이 없는 두 아들을 먹여 살려야만 했기에 정말 못해본 일이 없으며 마지막에는 국가에서 단속하는 중국과의 개인 장사를 하게 되었습니다.
I wasn't sure if I could provide my 2 sons with what they needed, so I decided to join the illegal trading business.
그 과정에서 5차례 군 노동단련대에 들어가 강제 노동을 하면서 저희들은 사람이 아니라 짐승만도 못한 처지였습니다.
During that time, I was also sent to a military labor camp 5 times and forced to do labor. Year by year, just like this, I started to make some money and barely sustain my life.
조금만 잘못해도 처벌로 산고지를 띄우고 어떤 때는 밖에 판자로 지은 변소 앞에 세워놓고 변소님 안녕하십니까를 100번씩 해야만 하였습니다.
She was explained the punishment that she had to went through.
이렇게 힘들게 조금이나마 장사 미천을 마련하였는데 2009년 11월 30일 북한에서 화폐 개혁을 통하여 쌀 한 톤 450을 쌀 수 있는 돈을 국가에서 빼앗아 가고 몇 달 후에 100분의 1로 나누어 주는데 그 돈으로는 쌀 19kg를 쌀 수 있었습니다.
However, on November 30, 2009, the government took all my money under the name of currency exchange. The amount of money it took was enough to purchase 1 ton and 470 kilograms of rice. The following year, in June, the government returned my money that was worth it 100th of what they originally stole from me.
저는 도저히 참을 수 없어 이런 사회에서 내가 살아갈 수 없겠구나 생각하고 아이들에게 쌀과 얼마간의 돈을 남겨두어 엄마가 자리 잡고 너희들을 데리러 오겠다는 약속을 남기고 2010년 7월 탈북하였습니다.
I felt like the whole world was collapsing on me and there I lived. I knew that I couldn't live in a country like this. At the end of June 2010, after making sure that my sons have enough food and money to sustain their lives, I promised my sons that I would settle down in China first and come back to get them all. I defected to China.
중국 장순에서 성경 공부를 하던 도중 중국 조선족의 밀고로 한국 간첩이라는 죄로 붙잡히게 되었습니다.
In China, I met a younger sibling of my friend who was working with South Korean missionary after defecting, and we studied the Bible together, and a Korean Chinese guy informed the police against us, so we were arrested by the State Security Commission private officers.
3일간 중국 국가안전위원회에 붙잡혀 지소를 받았지만 실제 한국 간첩이 아니어서 중국 백산 정신심리구류소에 이감되어 한 달 있고 다시 딤강 변방대 구류장에 이송되어 2달 동안 갇혀 있었습니다.
The Korean Chinese guy who told the police that we are South Korean spies, so 3 of us were interrogated for 3 days. But because we just studied the Bible, they sent us to a physically detained center in Baeksan. The next day, I was transferred to the Limgang penal facility.
감방 안에는 수도와 화장실이 전혀 없고 낡은 바게트에 뚜껑도 없는 곳에 대소변을 보게 하고 그 바게트에 다 차야만 버릴 수가 있어 감방 안은 악취가 진동하였습니다.
At Limgang penal facility, they only gave me a plastic container without a cover to be used as the toilet, and they won't let me empty it out until it was full. My room was full of the unpleasant smell.
변방대 군인들이 먹다가 남은 밥이 있어야 하루에 한 끼 아니면 2끼를 주는 것이 전부였습니다.
I received usually 1 meal a day and maybe 2 if I got lucky. The meal they gave me were the leftovers from what they had first and a mixture of side dishes, all mixed up in a bowl.
림강 병반대 2호 감방에서 2달 동안 잡혀 있으면서 계속 항의하여 세수를 딱 한 번 할 수 있었습니다.
During my entire 2.5 months of detention center experience, staying in a second cell, I only got to wash my face once.
변방대 군인이 밥을 빨리 먹지 않는다고 침을 배도 제가 앉아있는 곳에 던지고 자기가 피우던 담배꽁초를 던져서 저희 밥그릇에 들어가는 일도 있었으며 이에 항의한다고 철대문을 열고 들어와 전기곤봉으로 때리고 위협하기도 하였습니다.
They often didn't provide me with anything. Also, one time, they yelled at me for eating slowly. So one of them threw their cigarette at me and it went into my rice bowl. Because I was very upset, I protested, so they started hitting me with electric buttons.
2011년 1월 중순 북송되어 양강도 보이부 직거래소에 도착하니 식당에서 근무하던 아줌마를 불러 저희들을 복도에 세워놓고 옷을 모두 벗게 하고 위생장갑도 끼지 않고 자궁에 손을 넣어 돈을 숨겼는지 검사하고 뜀뛰기를 시키는 것이었습니다.
On January 2011, I was repatriated back to North Korea through the Changbek Bridge connected to Limgang Province Haeun State Security Detention Center. When I got there, the officer of the day called out for someone, and the woman made me stand in the hallway, took my clothes off, and insert her hand into my private area to see if I hid the money.
검사가 끝나고 감방 안에 들어가려고 사람이 겨우 쪼그리고 있어야 들어갈 수만 있는 작은 철문으로 앉아있는데 엉덩이를 발로 차서 들여보내고 그 다음 날부터는 예심이 시작되었는데 그 고통이란 한마디 말로 표현할 수가 없습니다.
After this, they sent me to the fifth cell. The cell was really tiny, only one person can fit in. I shared the cell with 13 women who were all repatriated back to North Korea from China, and I started to get punishment, which I cannot explain.
4 내지 5평 되는 곳에 13명 넘게 있었고 어떤 때는 20명 넘게도 있을 때도 있어 방 안에는 쪼그리고 잠도 제대로 잘 수 없고 조금만 움직여도 철장 앞에 나가 권총 소재 때 손을 때리고 다리도 엉덩이 90, 다리 90도, 엉덩이 90도, 팔 90도 이렇게 벌을 써야 했습니다.
The next day, I was interrogated harshly. They asked me what I was doing in China and if I ever encounter South Koreans, and they told me to write down everything on a piece of paper every day. I heard people screaming in the preliminary hearing room and investigators swearing. After returning from the interrogation exhausted, the guards made me put my hands on my knees and sit still. If I moved an inch because I had a cramp, they made me repeat bending my knees, hip, and arms 90 degrees angle. If I fell after doing it for 5 minutes, the guards swore at me and gave my cellmate the same punishment. It was hard to sustain hearing others' complaints and reassessment.
혼자 제대로 서 있지 못하면 감방 전체가 처벌을 주니 다른 사람들이 원망과 불평 또한 이만저만이 아니었습니다.
She just repeated the same thing. So if she couldn't get the punishment by herself, the all cellmates get same punishment with her.
그래도 저는 감방에서 은인을 만나 뇌물을 주고 한 달 만에 풀려나올 수 있었고 같이 북송되었던 젊은 청년은 정치범 수용소에 가게 되었습니다.
After a month, I ran into acquaintance with his help. After bribing him, I was released from the detention center after 40 days of being detained there. And the guy who was repatriated back with her was guilty of anti-state reactionary crime and sent to political prison camp.
나는 얼마나 혼이 났는지 한국에 가는 것이 말처럼 쉬운 것이 아니구나를 깨닫고 모든 것을 포기하고 억울한 대로 참고 살아야 되겠다고 생각했습니다.
The whole experience took a lot of me and thought to myself that defecting to South Korea is so much harder than I expected. At the time, I made up my mind that I should just stay to reality, although I was being unfairly treated.
애들이 다 자라 군대에 나갔고 평범하게 살려 했는데 2013년 가을에 보위부에서 감시하는 친구를 숨겨준 죄로 군 보위부 반탄과장과 국가 보위부 현실 체험 나왔던 지도원들이 영장도 없이 저희 집에 달려들어 가택 수색을 당하였습니다.
I was afraid that I might make another impulsive decision to defect the country. I sent my 2 sons to the military so that way every time I could just endure my life. However, after 2 to 3 years, in October 2013, I harbored my friend who was on the watch list of the military department within the State Security Bureau. And when my friend got arrested, their department and 3 officers broke into my house when I wasn't around. They searched my house and confiscated my renminbi goods and that I sold in the market and other basic daily necessities.
집에 있던 중국 돈과 장사하던 물건들, 일반 생활 필수품까지 모두 희수해 갔습니다. 거기서 중국 선전화가 발견되자 이를 핑계로 보이부의 조사를 받게 되었고 희수해간 물건을 돌려주지 않았으며 저는 도저히 참을 수가 없어 이 사이에서 살아갈 수가 없다고 생각하고 보이부에 찾아가 반탄가정이 도둑놈이라고 신고하고 또다시 탈북하게 되었지만 내륙으로 들어오던 도중 다시 변방돼 잡혀 북송되게 되었습니다.
For a month, I tried to find the items that they stole from me, but all I got were accusation and resentment. Because I couldn't just ignore what I experienced, I told the State Security Military Department political head that the head of the other military department within the State Security stole my items, so he is a thief. I explained everything to him, and that's when I decided to defect for the second time.
내가 붙잡혀가자 반탄가장은 안가품으로 내가 남조선이 기자회견하러 가는 년이라고 엉뚱한 자료를 더 보이부 직결소에 제출하자 그때부터 저는 직결소적으로 제일 악질인 예시문이 가혹한 고문과 취소를 받았습니다.
So after she accused to the another head of political security department, the head of political security department who stole her items started to accuse her for another reason.
전문 고문을 배운 놈이라 다리 때려도 뼈가 부러지지 않을 것만 골라가며 매일같이 몽둥이로 때리고 가죽 혁띠로 때리고 머리끄덩이를 잡아 벽에 찢어 놓는 말로 정말 표현할 수가 없습니다.
The detective's interrogator knew how to beat certain areas of the body with hard muscles to avoid breaking bones, since they were trained to be professional interrogators.
지금도 저희 다리에는 그 몽둥이에 맞은 자리가 우묵하게 다 들어가 있고 목뼈가 좀 잘못되어 목도 온천히 움직이기가 힘듭니다.
She still have club pursuit marks and scars on her legs through 10 years have passed. Can you imagine how harshly and cruelly that they beat her with a club, and she still cannot move her neck smoothly?
하루는 머리를 너무 맞아 감방에 들어와 토하며 쓰러졌는데 옆에 애들이 네 진탕이 온 것 같다고 개원에게 이야기하여 이것이 집결소 소장의 귀에 들어가 그 다음 날부터는 고문이 좀 줄어들고 갖은 욕설과 해우 또한 장난이 아니었습니다.
One day, after she returned to herself from the interrogating room, she vomited and collapsed. Her cellmates called a detention guard to inform that it seems she had a brain concussion. This was reported to the head of the holding center. After the incident, their torture was reduced, but their verbal abuse was continued.
이렇게 지조를 받고 감방에 들어가면 또 감방 안에서 개원들이 고문이 또 장난이 아니었습니다.
After suffering the interrogation, I had to endure more violence by prison guard when I returned to the cell.
감방에는 물이 나오지 않으니 못된 이 심원들은 자기 근무 시간에 냄새 난다고 변을 보지 못하게 하는 정말 말도 되지 않은 고문을 다 겪어야 했습니다.
In the cell, water came out twice a day. We had to correct correct the water to flourish away our own waste. But this woman was not enough to flourish. So cell always had a stench. We are not even allowed to do our own wool moment whenever we needed to because of the bad odor.
여자들은 소변을 보겠다고 거짓말하고 변을 몰래 보는데 남자들은 도저히 거짓말할 수가 없으니 바지에 변을 보는 현상도 종종 있었습니다.
So the prison guard forbade us. Women could pretend to urinate if they have to defecate. In case of men, they had to sit down when they needed to defecate. Therefore, they could not even lie to the guard. If the cellmates report the guards on duty, the guards shout to quickly clean the pants in 1 minute.
하루는 옆에 2호 감방 남사가 바지에 변을 보았는데 뒤 사람이 냄새가 난다고 제기하니 개원이 인간의 쌍욕을 다 하면서 1분 동안에 처리하라고 하니 맹물이 그 바지와 속옷을 맹물이 헤어있고 꽉 싸가지고 그대로 입고 앉아 있어야 했습니다.
Yeah, she just repeated what the man had gone through.
하루는 옆에 감방에서 말하다가 들키웠다고 그 남자를 철창 앞으로 불러내고는 철창에 머리를 대고 입을 벌리라고 그러고는 침도 아닌 가래를 받아서 그 사람이 입에 넣는 것이었습니다.
One day, one of his cellmates got punished to eat some dirty from the political prison guard as a result of cheating with another cellmates.
매일같이 때리고 올려도 자백을 받아낼 수 없으니 저는 심파보안국으로 넘겨져 감방에 오게 되었으며 북한 인권은 그 어디에 가나 마찬가지였습니다.
Even though they interrogated me for almost 2 months, and they could not get the confessions they wanted from me, so I was moved to the province state security department and eventually was sent to the province police in North Korea. Yeah.
심파보안국 감방에 들어가니 감방 규정을 외우게 하였는데 지수들은 다 도둑놈이다. 도둑놈과 선생님이 차이는 하늘과 땅 차이므로 선생님을 마주볼 수 없으며 눈길조차 마주칠 수 없다고 하였습니다.
There, I was forced to master rules of the cell room. These rules are all detainees are called robbers. Detainees cannot look off the guards because there are big difference between detainees and guards, like teacher, like sky and earth. They cannot have eye contact with guards, nor talking with other detainees.
북한이 어느 감방이나 다 화장실을 마음대로 볼 수가 없었습니다. 하루는 강원도 천내에 있는 59살 되는 아줌마가 손꿈을 보고 미신 행위를 하였다고 감방에 갇혔는데 그 언니가 개원들이 눈을 피해 몰래 화장실을 보다가 들키웠는데 3시간 동안이나 변기에 코를 박고 엎드려 있으라고 이런 처벌을 주었습니다.
And she came to realize that in every detention center, all detainees cannot use toilet freely. And there was a 6-year-old woman from the political detention center who was sentenced for 3 years reduction because she went around to tell people's fortune. One day, this woman had to go to the toilet frequently due to diarrhea.
그래도 고향이니 저는 아는 보안원들이 있어 뇌물을 주고 재판에서 교화 인연을 받고 개천 교화소에 가게 되었습니다.
She was too embarrassed to ask again and again. She defected without permission when the young guard was not around. However, the 6-year-old woman was caught by the guard. The young guard was so angry and verbally abused this poor woman and punished her to kneel down by putting her nose so close to the toilet for 3 years. Compared to this 6 years old woman, she was able to transport to Gachon Reduction Center through a labor camp after being sentenced to 2 years of reduction through 3 times trials by bribing prosecutor and knowing some defectives at the public security office of her province.
육중한 전기철 대문을 지나 감방 안에 들어가니 거기 있는 사람들은 사람이 몰골이 아니라 모두 영양실조로 백골이 모습이었습니다. 매일같이 사람들이 죽어나가고 너무 많이 죽어나가니 큰 웅덩이를 하나 파놓고 달구지로 사람이 시체를 지르다 그 웅덩이에 넣고 또 넣고 그 웅덩이에 다 사람이 차야지만 흙을 조금 덮고 그 위에 강냉이 농사를 지어 교화소 밭들은 강냉이 농사가 잘 되었습니다.
And after she went to the new Gachon political prison camp, she noticed immediately that this prison was a miserable living hell, which animal-like people mingle together when she entered its political prison camp. Their prisoners were fed a handful of rotten, uncooked ground corn, and dead bodies are dumped into a deep ditch, and a little dirt was spread over them for several days. Even the gardens in the prison were flourishing with all kinds of plants because they cultivate gardens on the top of the burial ground where dead bodies become rotten and become fertilizer.
교화소에서 내가 형기를 마치고 나오는데 세상으로 나가는 내가 너무 부러워. 정말 눈물 속에서 발에 옷으든 정말 사람이 아닌 짐승 같은 눈빛을 하고 저를 보는 그 친구들의 모습을 지금도 잊을 수가 없습니다.
Yeah, so finally on May 2015, she was free from the prison after her prison term was reduced to 6 months less than the original. How she waited the day of the freedom. She cannot forget animal-like eyes of the envious remaining prisoners, while crying and sighing on the day of her release.
또 보이부 직결소에서 받은 고문 후유증으로 다리를 절며 나오는데 기차 역전 뒷산에 대문같이 구호를 써붙였는데 김정은 동지를 위하여서는 슬픔도 고난도 행복이다 라는 구호를 보는 순간 저는 정말 끓어오르는 격분을 참을 수가 없었습니다. 어디 이 마음을, 이 억울한 심정을 하소연할 것이 없었습니다.
I was so angry and wanted to sob loudly, pounding the earth when I saw the big banner written, "For dear comrade Kim Jong-un, suffering and sadness are happiness," while limping to the Gachon train station.
저는 정말 이 사회에서 우리 아이들의 운명을 맡길 수는 도저히 없어 이번에 가다가 잡히면 죽을 것이다 생각하고 3번째 탈북을 시도하여 마침내 2016년 10월 대한민국에 입국하게 되었습니다.
I made up my mind firmly, and I would go to South Korea when I returned to my hometown, and I was prepared to die by swallowing poisons if I get caught. I finally escaped to South Korea successfully on October 2015, and I entered South Korea in 2016.
서울에 와서 돈을 벌어가지고 2019년 애들을 데려와야 되겠다고 생각하고 중국에 가서 북한에서 군사복무하는 2 아들을 데려다가 지금은 서울에서 행복하게 정말 자유를 누리며 살고 있습니다.
I worked hard and living happily with my 2 sons in South Korea, where I so dearly longed for In 2019, I brought my 2 sons to South Korea who were serving military duty in North Korea.
우리 고향 땅에는 지금 이 시각도 북한 정권이 참혹한 인권 유린과 폭행으로 죽어가고 있는 정치범 수용소와 교도소들이 끌려가는 수많은 우리 불쌍한 형제들을 도와주십시오.
Please help the poor brothers and sisters in North Korea who are being tortured, being killed, abused human rights, being deported to the political prison camp and detention center.
정말 입에 담기도 민망하지만 정말 북한의 모든 구류장들에서 고문하고 제대로 먹이지는 못할지언정 대소변이라도 제대로 볼 수 있는 인간의 초보적인 권리라도 누릴 수 있게 세계의 목소리를 높여주십시오.
It is shameful to ask you, but please raise your voice so that detainees and prisoners can have their very basic human rights to freely to go to toilet at prisons and detention center.
지금 이 시각도 중국 공안에 붙잡혀 북송당할 위기에 처해 있는 2천여 명의 탈북민들이 있다는 것을 저희는 알고 있습니다.
Even at this very moment, I know there are more than 2,000 North Korean escapees in China facing danger of deportation to North Korea after captured by Chinese public security police.
자기가 평생 살아오던 고향을 그리고 부모 형제가 살아있는 그곳을 떠나 낯설은 타향에 가고 싶은 사람이 과연 있을 수 있을까요?
Please have mercy on these poor and helpless people who want to seek freedom after escaping their hometown, who wants to leave their homeland where dear parents and siblings live, who wants to leave their homelands where dear parents and siblings live.
얼마나 힘들고 힘들었으면 참고 참다 못해 정든 고향을 떠나볼 수밖에 없었던 저들을 불쌍하게 생각해 주십시오.
So nobodies want to leave their homeland without their parents and dear family. But their difficulty and miserable lives have led them to escape their homeland. So please raise your voice for them.
그들이 북송된다면 어제날 제가 겪었던 그 모진 고문과 인권 유린을 당할 것이며 아니 그보다 더한 고통을 당할 수 있습니다.
If they were sent back to North Korea, they would suffer so cruelly in detention center and prisons just like myself, even more harshly.
그 불쌍한 우리 형제들이 북한으로 북송될 것이 아니라 그들이 원하는 국가로 갈 수 있도록 중국 정부가 마음을 돌릴 수 있도록 힘써 주십시오.
I beg you to diplomatically pressure the Chinese government so that those poor escapees can be sent to the country of their choice, such as South Korea, and other democratic nation which will never send them back to North Korea.
우리 고향 북한 땅의 인권을 위하여 조금이라도 귀 기울여 주시고 힘써 주십사 하는 마음으로 두서없이 몇 글자 말씀드립니다. 너그러운 사랑과 이해로 들어주십시오. 아울러 이 자리를 마련해 주신 관계자 여러분 선생님들에게 깊은 감사의 인사를 드립니다. Thank you very much.
I am sending this letter hoping that you became more interested in human rights of North Korea. I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who attended this meeting, who has made this event possible, and thank you.
I would like to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who made it possible for me to testify at such an important event. Thank you, DFF's Congressional Defense and Foreign Policy Forum. Thank you, Ms. Susan Schulte and Mr. Jason West and North Korea Freedom Coalition in the USA. And also thank you, Freedom Speaker International and Ms. Eun Lee, Mr. Casey Lartek in South Korea. I'm grateful there are people in this world who are concerned about the status of North Korean women. I hope my speech will be helpful to everyone concerned about North Korean in general and North Korean women and children in particular. And thank you to my mom, who remains at the center of my universe, for giving me life on this earth, and for giving me a second life when she rescued me from North Korea. I would like to talk about 3 things today. 1, domestic violence I witnessed in North Korea. 2, my escape from North Korea as an example how North Korean women are at risk. 3, why North Korean women leave their children behind, and that people should be more understanding of their difficult situation. What I say is based on my own experience living in the rural part of North Korea. Other North Koreans may have had different experiences. As a brief introduction, my name is Haeun. I was born in 1993, just as North Korea was going through a famine. I grew up in a rural part of North Korea, about 150 miles from Pyongyang. When I was there, I had no idea how close I was to Pyongyang. It seemed to be in another universe. I was born into an affluent family, but it fell apart. I witnessed domestic violence in my home from young age of 3. I had vivid memories of my birth father beating my mom. No one came to stop the beatings. There's no 911 to call the woman from being beaten. My father beat my mom until he was exhausted. This kind of domestic violence was common in my surrounding. Whether it was day or night, it was common to hear husbands beating their wives. I heard that those women, their husbands would beat them almost any time they challenged them. However, no one rushed there to stop the assault. North Korean women were expected to accept being beaten. I never heard of women's rights. When I was in North Korea, I didn't know domestic violence was the violation of women's rights. My mom finally couldn't take it anymore, and she divorced my father. North Korean women who get divorced are vulnerable in a patriarchal society, and their children are likely to have difficult lives. My mom and I lived in a barn for about 2 years. I often survived on grace, and I rarely ate rice. I have found the memories of that time and developed a deep relationship with my mom. I was a child who was happy to be with her mom and happy she wasn't getting beaten. My mom married again, but it was another terrible marriage. Later, she attempted suicide. We were homeless together at a train station. She often left me in the homes of relatives as she tried to make a living for us. My mom was the center of my universe. Then, when I was 12 years old, she suddenly disappeared. It felt like the universe had collapsed. I waited countless times for my mom to return. When I heard the sound of the train approaching, I ran to the station. Bang, bang. It felt like my mom was calling me. I would lean against the door of my aunt's home and fall asleep, waiting for my mom. The sound of footsteps passing by would wake me up. I always hoped it would be my mom. My dream when I was in North Korea was that I would be able to see my mom's face again. I wasn't only the child waiting anxiously for his or her mom. When I out the train station looking for my mom, there were countless children like me, but they had no parents and were homeless. Some children couldn't even remember their mom's face. Looking back, I realized my suffering was not the worst of all, but it was still very difficult. I often ask myself why I was born in this world. Will I ever see my mom again? When they ever said that your mom abandoned you, I knew it wasn't true. I knew my mom loved me, but it was so hard for us to have a good life in North Korea. I now know that I suffered psychological trauma from those years of uncertainty. On the street, I often saw the corpses of people who had starved to death. In my own family, one of grandfathers who had been war hero starved to death. One of my uncles starved to death near my aunt's home. And one uncle who seemed to give up was suspect of throwing himself in front of a train. I knew several street children who starved to death, and I saw the dead bodies of many others. There were numerous times I also almost starved to death, and I also considered suicide. At the age of 12, I was already tired of living. As a child, I engaged in manual labor for years. I attended elementary school for only 1 year. I didn't even see a book for several years. When people ask me what I remember about North Korea, the main thing are carrying wood for hours, starving, and waiting for my mom. I was living a terrible life in North Korea with no future, no education, just working and trying to avoid starving to death. Then the most wonderful thing happened. My mom sent a broker to rescue me. She had not forgotten about me. She saved the money to pay for my escape. I was still young, so it took 3 rescue attempts before I was finally ready to escape. Despite all of this, I feel I'm lucky, especially this time of the year. Today is March 14. On March 19, 2011, I began my escape to freedom. I faced the danger several times. I was brutally beaten when guards caught me. on a train and was at risk of getting raped when I was sent to a call office at a train station. Then there were 3 terrible moments in my escape I will never forget. I was at the North Korean border. When you escape from North Korea, it isn't only I who is in danger. I knew if I got captured, my relatives could be punished. I decided if I got captured that I would kill myself with a knife when my mom had given to me when I was 10 years old. I wasn't going to go back to North Korea. I had already been beaten on the train. I didn't want to get tortured or raped. North Koreans escaping must think about many things. But women must also worry about sexual assault or rape. I thought I was being escorted by soldiers, but actually they were human smugglers. The broker secretly paid less money for smugglers instead of soldiers. That meant the border guards had not been bribed. Tang tang. It was the terrible sound I had heard when I saw public execution when I was younger. I kept running across the Tumen River along with 2 smugglers. I wanted to be reunited with my mom. I fell down 3 times, including into the ice. I felt like 1,000 knives were stabbing me. The female smuggler pulled me out of the water, and we made it to China. I was going to have a chance to see my mom again. There was still danger, but I had done it. For the first time in my life, I was outside of North Korea. 3. Why do North Korean women leave their children behind? My first night in China, I was taken to a container where there was another young North Korean girl who had also just escaped. As we talked, she told me that I was lucky to get out of poverty in North Korea. She had agreed to be sold in China. We were 2 North Korean girls who had just escaped, but we were headed in different directions. We cried together and hoped we could meet in freedom one day. I later learned it was too dangerous for my mom to take me with her. That's why she escaped first. My mom told me that she was willing to risk her life, but she couldn't take the risk I would get sold in China if we got captured together. She escaped first and rescued me 6 years later after she escaped to South Korea. After escaping through China, Laos, and Thailand, it was the greatest day of my life when I finally reunited with my mom on October 3rd, 2011. I would like to thank my mom from the bottom of my heart for giving me 2 different lives. One, she gave birth to me, and another when she rescued me from North Korea. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to give testimony. I hope North Korean children waiting for their moms like I did can hear this. I hope North Korean children and parents can meet in freedom so children can be with the center of their universes. North Korean children who are waiting need to know that their moms have them in their hearts forever. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We do have time for a few questions, and I want to defer to congressional staff first. If there's any members of congressional offices that would like to ask a question, what I'd like to do is stand and say your name and the office you represent and any question that you have. I'll give you guys the first opportunity. Oh, okay. Are there any people that want to ask any questions before we close? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask our three witnesses just to stand up so we can honor and recognize them again. You guys are so brave. It's been very difficult doing this work since 1994 because I feel terrible having to ask North Koreans to retell their stories because it's so painful. But it's the only way people can understand the horrors that are going on, that are continuing to go on. And I wanted to end on an upbeat note to let you all know that today was our day pretty much devoted to Capitol Hill. We did have a wonderful meeting hosted by Senator Tim Kaine, my senator from Virginia, and Senator Marco Rubio's offices this morning. That was very powerful. But also today's, because of NTD, because of the recording we're making, many people will be able to watch this to understand what's going on in North Korea. And I wanted to share with you what we're going to be doing in New York. If you know folks in New York, we're going to have our panel at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and then we're going to be going to what should be Otto Warmbier Way, which is the street across from the street the DPRK mission is on. We're going to lay flowers there to remember. There's a heartfelt connection that North Koreans have with the Warmbier family, because Otto Warmbier is basically the American face of the horrors that regime commits. They have a heartfelt connection. Mrs. Lee was sharing how she saw the trial on the North Korean propaganda channel and how deeply, deeply moved she was at his pleas to just let me go home, let me go home. So Cindy Warmbier, I reached out to her, and she was deeply moved that we were going to do this when we're up in New York. But we're going to lay flowers there, and then we are going to go to the Chinese mission, and we're going to lay flowers there too, and deliver a plea to Xi Jinping. We have a picture of him with his mother, a picture with him with his wife and his daughter, several pictures of him. We know family is important to him, and we're just going to basically plea that this is about families. Let these people go on to South Korea. There is nothing that can be gained by forcing them back to North Korea. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here, for being patient with translations. I want to thank our excellent translators, Esther Kim and Grayson Jang, and just... and everybody with the congressional staff. Johnny Park is the guy who translates senators and congressmen messages to Korean for the broadcast of Free North Korea Radio. And I also want to recognize Uni Evanson, who's been helping the delegation and getting them everywhere they need to go, and just been an amazing help to us behind the scenes, doing all this hard work, making everything go smoothly. We love her dearly. Thank you, Uni Evanson, right here. So. And don't forget to order green light to freedom. So, thank you again. God bless you all. Apogee! Chayubakang! That's, please God, free North Korea! All right, thank you.